Hey everybody, how you doing? I'm Mark from the Landcat. This legend over here is Terry Huddart, also from the Landcat. And the purpose of our little session today is to talk about due diligence. A horrendous phrase and one I've hated for a long time, and I fought really hard for a while to get it called something else and to stop everybody talking about due diligence, which to me is something that happens when you buy a company, but it doesn't really matter because nobody listened. So what we're actually going to do is talk about due diligence and how you might go about using the Analyser software system that the Landcat developed and sells, and which Terry is in charge of, to help you with that. We do lots and lots of demos of Analyser, and you can sign up and look at functionality and all that kind of stuff, but they're always very focused on how to do certain things and how you move from this bit of a system to the other. We kind of lose the bigger picture sometimes, and so I thought maybe that's what we could do today. So we'll talk a little bit about why Analyser works the way it does, what we think due diligence should look like, some examples of good things and less good things that we've seen, and by less good things I'm being really very polite there, and have a think about how you might go about embedding some of this stuff in your day-to-day life. Because if evolving regulation, and I'm about a minute into this and I haven't said consumer duty yet, so I'm going to say it now. Those of you that had under 5 minutes in your bingo card are correct, well done. But all this regulation means that doing this stuff well, which doesn't mean taking hours and hours and hours over it every week, is really, really important. So let's start off by saying hi to Terry. How you doing, Terry?
I'm doing good, thanks Mark. Yeah, it's lovely to be here having our fireside chat about due diligence.
Yes, it is.
Looking forward to it.
And by here, what we mean is the office that we come to every day anyway. But it's a wee room in it with a camera and some lights now. So there we go. It's not like we had to go very far. We'll talk first of all, if we may. Analyser's got lots and lots of different bits in it, right? So anybody that's an Analyser user or has had a look or is in their free trial or whatever that's watching this, what bit are we talking about today? Which, when we're looking at the system, where do we need to go in order to start making these decisions for what's going to be most suitable for clients?
So yeah, I actually had visions of doing this in a dark corner over a bottle of whiskey. By the way, I mentioned fireside chat, and here we are under lights in our lovely new studio, which is even better. To answer your question, the bit of the system to go to do full due diligence is the part that's called due diligence inside. There's the due diligence module inside Analyser, and you can do that for platform, and you can also more recently do it for MPS, and that all sits in there and it's repeatable once you've done the exercise once. And I think what our main objective that we wanted to get across in this chat, without actually showing you the system, is why we do that due diligence the way that we do it, because we've got a certain process, we've got a beginning, a middle and an end, and as I mentioned, that can then be repeated, and it goes into quite a lot of detail each time you do it. But the first time you do the due diligence, you have to spend a reasonable amount of quality time with the system. And there is a reason for that, because if you put rubbish in anything, you get rubbish out. And therefore, we wanted to chat a bit about how we started doing due diligence. So Mark, when I first joined the Landcat, I remember the Landcat was in the midst of doing a due diligence job for quite a big client at the time. And to me, coming in, it seemed like around the office it was a particularly big bit of work. And something that was fairly all-consuming.
It was, yeah, I remember it really, really well actually. And it wasn't so much an advisor so much as a provider that was looking to bring on a platform for a part of their business. Doesn't really matter too much what it was, but it wasn't just the case that we were worrying about suitability. They were also worrying about risk management. They had a close and continuous relationship with the FCA, so they were really under the cosh all the time. They had to be defensible for years to come because they were committing for at least 5 years. So it was a strategic kind of piece. And so every little decision that we made on their behalf, we had to document have an audit trail and show why not only we were going a particular way, but why we weren't going all the other ways. And the discipline that we learned during that has stood us in really good stead, because in our minds anyway, evidenced decision making is the core of good suitability and therefore of good due diligence. There's no point saying, well, I used that one because I thought it was the best in my process, and then somebody says, oh, great, I believe that. Tell me about the process. Then you go, well, can't really do that quite so much because I didn't write it down. And so from that came a technique of working through a series of steps which kind of rejected the easy points of comparison first. And let me explain what I mean by that. So if you go through a due diligence exercise on Analyser, right, the last thing you'll screen companies out on is price. Most firms that do due diligence, the first thing they screen out on is
price.
Right? We shove that right to the end of the process. And there's a reason we do that. The first thing is something that is cheap and unsuitable is still unsuitable. And something that is expensive and suitable is still suitable. Price exists independently of suitability, except at the margins. Somebody's screaming at their screen right now going, what if it's 5 times the price of all the... Yeah, all right, fine, right? But most platforms or MPS providers aren't, right? You can throw a blanket over most of them most of the time. It's a few basis points here and there. So in this case, when we were doing the really big exercise, there was no point in talking about price at the start, because I can assure you that when we walked in to do a price negotiation with any provider that was going to get taken seriously, their starting rate that they published and that you'd see in heat maps from the LANCAT and all that kind of stuff, that was only the start of a discussion. And I'm sure lots of you have negotiated platform deals anyway, but you better believe that for hundreds of millions, if not billions of pounds that were under consideration for this exercise, we weren't taking anything except, yes sir, what would you like, for an answer, right? So there was no point screening anything on price. So we move that to the back of the process. What we want to do in our process, in any good suitability process, right, is work out who can do what it is you need them to do. And that's the main thing first. We start with the whole of the market, and it kind of doesn't matter actually if we're talking about platforms or MPS providers or SIP companies or whatever else, but Analyser does platforms and MPS, so we'll stick to that for now. You start with who can do what it is I need them to do, and then we start running the process from there. So that's how we got there.
We do it, and then after I've been in the LANCAT for a couple of years, we started to collect more and more data and do more of these bespoke due diligence consultancy work for different clients. Typically it was for larger IFA firms, at least medium sized, but usually larger, who could afford to pay us, frankly, almost up to 5 figures to do the due diligence for them, even well into 5 figures, depending on how far we went in the process, such as sitting in on the beauty parade and delivering the final report. But really what struck us is, and this basically Analyser exists to get me out of doing work, because Mark used to make me do consultancy work, and that a lot of that was the due diligence. And the idea was, what if we could take this thing, and it was the in-depth process that Mark has just described, starting with the functionality, looking through the business, and eventually ending up on price, and having a report that could properly underpin the work that you've done, describe and evidence who you aren't using, as well as who or what you are using, and have a good audit trail behind that. We would do that as a big written report that would probably have, if I'm honest, several iterations, several edits. We would go back and forward with the client. You'd get to version 12 or something like that by the time we were happy that we've, dotted every I and crossed every T. I got that the right way around, and all that sort of thing. So it was a big industry, and the other side of it was that 27 or 28 platforms had to fill out a questionnaire as well. So we were creating all of that work and expense, which ultimately the client pays in the industry. So to get me out of doing work, really, and make it as software, I had a kind of chats with Mark about, could we turn this online? Lots of things are going online these days. Think about anything but obviously platforms. So how long did it used to take to manually run a client portfolio that had a pension with one provider, an ISA with one provider, a bond with another provider, and you make probably several pensions, and make changes, change the direction of the investments, make contributions, take money out, do an annual report, all that sort of thing. The things that Analyser started off assessing was platforms and doing the due diligence, and that's one example. It's something that used to be quite complex. So we gave it a shot, and we looked for someone to work with who could help us take the data, the service online, and scale it, and went through that process for a period of time.
Yep, and the whole point of it is, by the way, those original big exercises were comically cheap, by the way. That was very cheap.
Yeah.
That was super cheap. I mean, I was almost embarrassingly low cost as far as I was concerned. I'm not sure the firms always felt that way, but hey ho. But now you can get all the stuff that we learned basically over running goodness knows how many due diligence exercises over a number of years for billions and billions and billions of pounds of assets. You get all that for 300 quid a year inside Analyser, right? And the technique that we learned through those years is now systemized in exactly the way Ted's talking about inside software, because that's what software does. So when you're looking to do this right, I think you've got to check some of your kind of prejudices and your preconceptions at the door. So when we talk to firms about what would your selection criteria look like, we would often hear people say things like, I hate life cos. Right, all right, I don't like cheese. Is that helpful? Or people saying, I only want to work with firms who have at least, check notes, £10.6 billion worth of assets. Oh, what do you know? The existing platform that they're using has in fact £10.7 billion worth of assets on it. And they've had a word with their BDM before starting this process, right? So all of this stuff that you would get people walking in saying, well, I want it like this, I want it like that. It needs to be, somebody within these postcodes or something like that, and trying to game the process to get to the answer that they already had. We had to get rid of all of that. So the way we've built Analyser doesn't let you do that, and that's deliberate. But I think firms, Tez, they sometimes get frustrated with that, right?
I think they can do, because to me, and we do one-to-one demos or consultations with firms several times a week now, and we always start with where the firm is. What is your client proposition? What are you currently using? Why are you using it? Why are you not using this one? And so on and so forth. And Analyser, we do that because Analyser is built around plugging all that in before you go and do the research. And yeah, confirmation bias does get talked about quite a lot. It has been from the regulator for a year. There's a flip side of that, which is proven compatibility. So if you've used a platform for 5, 6, 10 years, however long it is, compared to another, and you can only really know how these things work until you've went through the life cycle of processes and had it embedded in your business and had your staff using it, your admins, or just you if you're a small firm, and really know what it's like. The service that you may receive from a platform could be different from the same platform that a firm down the road receives, because they've got a different account manager, or a firm in a different part of the country because they've got a different BDM, that sort of thing. Also, different operating systems and user experiences simply suit different firms. They all connect better with different software to the what you already using. So there's a lot of things that you need to get into with that sort of thing in terms of the proven compatibility. But starting from a blank sheet of paper, as Mark said, is important. And a question that's kept being posed to me over the past couple of months, this seems to be a new one, is can Analyser do a blind taste test due diligence exercise? which speaks to what Mark's just said, is getting rid of the prejudices and starting with a blank sheet of paper. The answer is it can't do that completely, and that is because you need to assess the business to get to the end. So you need to know what the business is. You need to know its scale. You need to take into consideration whether you make it important or not, its profitability, its capital adequacy, its current service levels, its ambitions, its direction of travel, all those sorts of things. But when you start with the analyzer process, and this is the blind taste test, you plug in your client proposition and your requirements without it showing who any of the platforms are. When it shows you the results, yeah, it'll say the name, and then there's things that you might need to do, because there might be some platforms you simply can't use because the platform expects you to put X million of assets in a year before it'll let you and your clients in the door. Yeah, it happens. You might need to become a member of something like a networky kind of thing in order to be able to allow to use it. So therefore you can't, even if it ticks lots of proposition boxes and it's cheap. You might have used it in the past and thought the service was something beginning with S and ending in E, and that might put you off, and therefore it's a poor cultural fit with your business. So there are other justifications, but going back to the original question, yeah, I've always used it. I like the colour of the pretty pictures of the logo. The golf days are fantastic, and every time I try and move, they say they're going to knock 5 or 10 basis points off the price. These are not good reasons to stay where you are.
The flip side again of that, and proven compatibility was what Terry called it, which is very kind of long words, too long for me. One of the things that I know is that I've goodness knows how many advice firms I've known over the years, and we've worked with hundreds now on Analyser. I don't think I've ever seen somebody that's knowingly doing the wrong thing.
Yep.
That's got something that's fundamentally unsuitable. Most firms try to do a really, really good job for their clients day in, day out, and thank goodness for that, right? That's kind of not what we're saying here. What we're trying to get to is what is the most suitable solution. What will do things best? And so to start off with, well, is the thing I've got broken? Again, probably not the most helpful. But we do get situations all the time where people say, well, I can't use XYZ platform because it doesn't do that. So I've ruled it out. And the answer is, well, yes, it does, actually. It does. It either might have added that as a feature in the last little while, or it actually always did it and you just didn't know, or it does it in a slightly different way from what you were thinking of, but it does do it. Similarly, I've had firms personally where they've said, well, I like to use ABC platform because of its decumulation functionality, although we should point out that decumulation is not a word. I'm going to keep saying that for the next X years till I retire, and that'll have about as much impact as trying to stop due diligence as a phrase. I really don't know why I bother with this stuff. Anyway, I like the decumulation functionality, and then we point out something that's a limitation or a quirk or whatever with the platform using it, and they're like, oh, I didn't know. I didn't know that. And it turns out that actually that might be a thing for some of their clients going forward. But there's one thing that sits inside all of this, and Terry said that we start with what your target client segment looks like. If you ever ask somebody or get asked or whatever, what is the best platform? It is like getting asked what's the best, I don't know, whiskey, maybe. Right? Because he mentioned whiskey. Yeah. And somebody says, well, it's a 25-year-old Lafroig, right? Well, to me, I'd clean my drains with it because I can't stand that stuff, right? It's horrible. It tastes of TCP to me. To me, it might be something from Highland Park or something lovely and sweet from Speyside or something. There's no answer to what is the best platform. We're missing the end of the sentence, and the end of the sentence is for what? Yeah. So we need to work out first, in a good due diligence exercise, what are we trying to do here? Are we running a platform that is trying to run very complex retirement income scenarios for clients? Are we running something that's basic accumulators? It's shove some money into your pension every year when your accountant says it's time, and we'll worry about it in 20 years' time. Are we trying to run super sexy portfolios with inheritance tax planning in our minds? Are we just using multi-asset funds and keeping everything super, super easy and all that kind of stuff? And if we don't know that, then we can't get to a good answer, because it can't be the case that everything, you just pick something that does everything on the basis that we're not likely to be queuing up for like a 7-seater MPV from Ferrari or something, right? Or a heavily peated whiskey from somewhere that, do you know what I mean? It's just daft, right? It's daft. So Tez, how do we make firms do this? Because we're going to make them go through this process, aren't we?
We do. And the first point is to think that the first point in doing it, or us helping or making firms do it, is that part of starting with your client segmentation, your target client definitions, which is very much a new part of the zeitgeist with Consumer Duty coming in. So target client definitions actually need to be written down. We're going to make that. It's already an Analyser, but we're going to make it mandatory. What your investment philosophy is, and crucially, you do your investment proposition part first, so you can find a venue to plug that into it. So that's the first bit. The second bit is to think very, seriously about whether or not you do client segmentation, and you should. A lot of this is a common scenario, is when I'll be sitting with a firm saying, "Do you do client segmentation?" and they'll go, "No, I don't do that. I've just got one client proposition." And we use 2 or 3 platforms depending on what one's suitable for each client. That this is another typical scenario, but we don't really do client segmentation. I mean, apart from the fact that if people are younger in accumulation, we might put them on this platform, and if they're a bit older, they're maybe likely to get this and be in this investment program. And then you'll say, well, so you do client segmentation? Well, yeah, but you do, and so they do it in their head. I would also echo what Mark has said, that I very rarely find that any firm has not thought deeply and well about the solutions that they're using for their clients. And when you sit down and speak to them, they can talk at length about it. And they know exactly, they know what they're doing and why, but what haven't they done is they haven't written it down.
Yeah.
And usually, a very high number of the times, that is a problem in doing good due diligence and suitability evidencing, and in this Consumer Duty world, but just in terms of good practice, as has always been in the past, that's usually the answer. That if there's a problem, that's usually where the problem is to document it, because there can be more justifiable reasons for using different solutions than people will often realise.
Yeah.
And it can be the more subjective areas, which aren't necessarily because it doesn't pre-fund pension tax relief, which can be quite a big thing for clients in accumulation. Because if the platform doesn't pre-fund pension tax relief and you've got to wait for the money to come in 3 to 6 months later, however good the provider is at getting it in and then applying it, you're out of the market, typically that's a bad thing. That's probably going to be better than 5 basis points, right? So but writing these things, it's very difficult to justify that without doing a little bit of a paragraph about it in order to write it down.
Yeah.
You only need to do it once, but it's fine. But those subjective bits is kind of the next bit in getting people to do it properly. So applying first the objective and then subjective through the lens of your particular client proposition. And that's likely to get you to a better answer and a better justification of your answers than if you don't do that.
Okay, so lots of chat here, but the upshot of it is, right, that if the thought of lifting the bonnet on the choices that you've already made, however well-intentioned and however rational and however suitable actually, if the thought of lifting the bonnet on it is just like, I really can't face this, that's what Analyser's here for, right? We've got your back, because it's okay if somebody gives you rails to run on. And that's the point of our process. So we're going to make you define what your target client segment is, sorry. Then we're going to ask you to go through the areas of functionality that are really important to you. And they're all very clearly labeled within Analyser. There's, how many hundred are there?
Data points.
Aye.
It's in the high hundreds in terms of proposition data points. And if we're a little bit cheeky and we include all the MPS performance data points going back over, we can multiply that to many, many thousands, but high hundreds across platform. And
you get people saying like, there's 150,000 data points. That's because they've got like the same portfolio for years and years and years. But there's only several hundred things that you can judge platforms on. But so we'll take you through a process which says what functionality do you need to do what it is you're trying to do for the people you're trying to do it for. And we'll present the results back of that. It's a simple screen, it's yeses and nos and all that kind of stuff. And we'll give you a list of the platforms that measure up. But that's only the first objective step. We've then got two more to go through, because if it were just the case that the platforms that did what you need to do were great, and then you could just pick the cheapest one and then just use it, then we could almost automate the whole thing. You could just click straight through into that platform to the system. But of course, that's not the case. You're a business. This is a business-to-business tool, a platform. It's got a lot more going on than just functionality. Of course, there's service, there's willingness to work closely with you. There's integration and how the business handles itself. There's financial strength and viability. There's all this kind of stuff to worry about too. So in the next step, once we've got the functionality bit sorted out, that's where we allow you now to bring some of your subjectivity back into it. And that's quite an important step. So you can say, I want to deal with larger companies. You can say, for example, I only want to deal with companies who can evidence profitability, or whose parent company can evidence profitability. Because I don't know if any of you have tried building technology, but it's very hard to make a profit while you're building it, right? Some years down the line, once you've got lots of users and so on, you can eventually pay back what it is you've spent on building the thing. Please subscribe to Analyser, please. And so on and so on and so on. So we give you a bunch of business metrics which you can choose from, and on we go. And only once we've got through those two big stages do we start talking about price. But along the way, there's something very special that we make you do that other people don't make you do, Tez, and that's about your decision making.
That's just writing down the rationale for your decision making at each stage. And that rationale then gets carried forward into your report and serves as part of the audit trail and justification for why you are and aren't using. So you've got the data itself, which is very objective, and that all gets held. That it doesn't do this, that, and other thing. The business metric data Mark was talking about, right down to data security and all that kind of level of detail. And then the pricing, the facts of the pricing that you would model, whether you include your own, if you have any bespoke pricing, which it's worth mentioning, you can build that into Analyser as well. But it's writing it down, and once you've done it that one time, and you've got it's a several page report with lots of appendices in it. It looks like quite a lot, but it's worth doing. That's kind of where we specialise in getting that full picture, objective, subjective, all through all the different stages. Rerunning it is very quick. What's also is worth mentioning as well, we talked about the hundreds of different data points, and we deliberately built Analyser so users can choose to select hundreds of data points if they would like to, because some of our potential users that we did work with before we built it said they would want to use it that way, so we wanted to make it flexible. But most people tend to, and this is what I personally advise, is to focus on the 20 to 30 things that are really important to you for the client segment you're doing, or whether it's client proposition, and put them into that first features part, and then you're not left with, then you're crystallizing it. That's the way I like to encourage people to do it. So you don't be worried about having to sift through constantly hundreds and hundreds of ever-changing data points. The point is, though, that the data does change because platforms develop and change. So if you've done due diligence a year ago, it might not actually stack up today. There's been something like 12 major market changes in the platform sector alone in the past year, repricings, people buying people, rebrands, major proposition launches and revamps and all that kind of thing. So it's very difficult the old world used to be, we do due diligence every 2 years. That was when you had to send around questionnaires in order to get something that was, of a reasonable depth and quality. We hope that technology means that that's not the case anymore, but I would recommend doing it every quarter, as long as you can get a bit of kit that allows you to do that.
Yeah, if it's a huge, terrifying exercise, then once a year is as much as anybody's going to do, but we've got firms doing it every month now. Couple of things, we're coming towards the end now, but a couple of things. Hundreds of data points and all this decision making to do about what's important, that can be scary by itself, and that's why we've developed templates to get you going. So if you're, for example, running a drawdown segment or something like that, we can start you off with what we think commonly selected criteria are, and then you can change those to your own kind of liking as you go by. We're going to launch one, if it's not out already, specifically looking at areas of interest for consumer duty, because you may want to run a different kind of scan just for that. So we've got all kinds of interesting things to save you time as you go through. But the key point is that yes, you spend a little bit of time the first time you go through and you evidence, as we give you wee boxes to record why you're taking people through and why you don't, and we encourage you to do that. And then you get this big report at the end. The first time you go through, that will take you a little while to do. The second time you go through, it can be under 5 minutes, right? Full due diligence done in no time at all, because if your views are the same, your requirements for your target client are the same, and your business is the same, so you've not got new pricing deals or something like that, just run the report. You just rerun it. It pulls in the data that's live now and gives you the report back with the platforms that make it to the last step. Typically, by the way, a report will come out with 2 or 3 platforms that match all the criteria. And then, of course, you can make your decisions based on that. But any one of those 2 or 3 will be a good pick. You know that they'll all be suitable and will do what you want them to do. So what we're trying to do here is to make sense of the noise, right? I get an alert in my inbox every time a provider makes an update in Analyser, and they have a portal that they go in and make their proposition updates and so on. So they've all got access to the back end of the system, so they can only look at their own stuff. To make sure it's up to date. They can't see what users are doing or anything like that. They can't crawl around and watch what you're doing or anything, but they can see their own propositions. Every single day, I get alerts saying somebody's made a change. AJ Bell's made a change today, or Nucleus has made a change, or Aberdeen's made a change, whoever it may be, and it's constant. And the rate of minor propositional change that goes through is unbelievable, by the way. What people just think platforms sit there and don't do it. They do loads. They're constantly working on things. You might not notice quite a lot of them every day, but I assure you they do. And so the results you get from 1 year to the next can be really quite marked. But if you know what you care about, and if you've done that work at the start, and we can help you with that, right? It doesn't cost more, so we just do it because we like people using the system. If you know what's important to you, you can monitor the market really, really effectively by just running this process over and over again, every month, every 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever makes sense to you, but just rerun it, look for differences, and you'll see some. You really will. And then you can decide, do we need to do something about this? Because nothing will ever take away the fact that you're professionals and you need to use your skill and judgment. All we can do is give you the fact base. But basically, we can distill the whole of the platform market down to whether something's changed, and you can get at that in just a couple of minutes, as long as you do the first bit up front. We also, by the way, provide a big kind of roundup of what's changed every quarter, along with who's grown, who hasn't grown, who's bought whom, who's done the big things that Terry talks about, and we just send that round if you're a subscriber. So there's another way of monitoring the market, but the best way is to make due diligence a habit and to stop thinking of it as something massive and destabilizing, and instead something that actually is helpful.
Yeah, because of the constant change, okay, I'm going to say it, it's like cutting the grass. If you wait for the grass to get really long and cut it once every 6 months in the summer, it's a hard job. But if you keep on top of it and do it once a week, each cut's quite easy. And it's the same with platform due diligence. Once you've created that personalised algorithm, as I do like to call it, because it is what it is, and applied it to the market, you can reapply that algorithm to the market as it is 6 months from now or a year from now, in the way that Mark described, pretty quickly. So
you can sit a long time with somebody and never know that on camera they're going to use phrases like zeitgeist and personalised algorithm. But there you go.
I've been reading books.
You must have been. I have not been reading books. I've been reading HR manuals about whether it's okay to make fun of your colleagues in that kind of way. Interestingly, usually the analogy, Terry, you used there would have been the Forth Road Bridge. But did you know that it used to be as soon as you finished painting the Forth Road Bridge, you had to start again? They've developed a new paint now for the Forth Road Bridge, and that's not true anymore. It takes about 5 years or something to paint the Forth Road Bridge.
Was it 5 years?
I think it was. It was maybe more. I guess it depends how many of you are doing it.
I know some.
But now it lasts for years and years, so they don't have to do that anymore.
Absolutely gutted that people can't use that analogy.
It's a source of fine analogies that's been taken away. Listen, we're going to stop. I hope there's been at least something useful in here. When we do demos, as we say, there's no substitute for understanding the broader context. But as we talk about the broader context, there's no substitute for then showing how we do that. So if you think the nonsense that we've been chatting on about here has any resonance for you at all, and we kind of think it has to, this is not a thing that's going to go away, then come to a demo. If you maybe looked at Analyser and you're not sure what to do with it, give us a call, chat away about it. It's kind of what we do, so we love talking about it. Thanks for watching us, and we'll leave you to it. Have a good day.
See you later.